welcome to season 2 of Healthspan Horizons. So today we have actually two special guests. So co-hosting with me today, instead of usual, we have Dr. John Smith, who is a medical advisor at RejuveAI. And today we will be talking to Niklas Anzinger from Vitalia. So this will be super exciting. Niklas, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Just meeting John.
So I guess we can just start off with, who you are and how you kind of got into this longevity / bioacceleration space. We can start there.
Yeah, sure. I'm originally from Germany, and initially I was attracted to the world of ideas. I studied philosophy and economics, and I wanted to make big changes in the world. So I went to the area of policy. I joined think tanks in Washington, D.C., academia, research, management consulting, but I didn't find that very actionable. So instead, I went into entrepreneurship, initially like B2B, SaaS, AI things. I found that very exciting, how entrepreneurship works and applying and learning very practical skills. But I always wanted to achieve sort of the biggest, most ambitious possible mission I could go on. So when COVID started, I looked a lot into healthcare and into the kinds of things we need to build. But what I realized is that the most important barriers to sort of improving healthcare, longevity, and our human biology are not necessarily about the science and technology, right? So I was thinking about things like a GitHub for medical data. So researchers around the world could simultaneously work on solutions. But then I realized the problem or the main bottlenecks are human institutions. So things like the FDA, the US Food and Drug Administration, and medical authorities, which became very apparent during COVID, had just the wrong kind of mechanisms to innovate at scale and roll out important solutions to the world. So my favorite example is the COVID vaccine, right? The first vaccine was developed over the course of 1 weekend in January 2020, just on a computer based on the genome sequence of the virus. And then it took us 1 year to roll it out, which seems fast to people. But I don't think it was, right? It means sort of there's ways to do that much faster even. And then what was a problem is you couldn't like iterate on the vaccine and adapt it to new variants without going to approval again. So we were kind of stuck with the first vaccine that was most effective for the first variant. And you would have just needed to change the genome sequence again on a computer to make it more effective for other variants. But that kind of iteration was not possible within that system. So I realized the key innovation we need is really one of human institutions. That eventually led me down the path of charter cities and startup cities, right? So I found Prospera, which is building a startup city in Honduras on a very beautiful island called Roatan, which has developed kind of a new legal system based on common law. So the kinds of ideas that made Dubai and Singapore and Hong Kong successful. So I was very inspired by that, especially for the possibility to accelerate many of these frontier technologies, right? So in the beginning, I did a VC fund, and it turned out that health and biotech to me seemed like the one most important and biggest upside use case, right? So there was already a company here doing gene therapy called MiniCircle, and we doubled down on that with Vitalia. So now we're building a full scale biotech city, right, where we want to bring hundreds of companies here and be the best place in the world, better than San Francisco and Boston, to build a world-class biotech company enabled by a better environment to do business for entrepreneurs to thrive and bring world-class products to market.
Amazing. Yeah. And I mean, that's such a great point that, I mean, a lot of the kind of societal problems today are because of our institutions and systems kind of being suboptimal. And, it's super important that we kind of tackle that now and, kind of bring real solutions. And I mean, I guess I'm kind of curious as to your thoughts as to why that is, but I guess maybe before that we can go with, telling us about Vitalia City itself. And, 'cause I know you guys launched last year actually, and now we're going into year 2. So tell us about how that went and what it's all about.
Yeah, sure. So Vitalia is two things. It's a physical community, right? So we have a hub in Roatan, Honduras. We have leased a bunch of apartments, and we have sort of a makeshift container wet lab, things like that. There's also a medical clinic where people can get treatments and therapies, which existed in Prospera before Vitalia already, but that's one we're closely working with. And then we're a community of people. We're close to 1,000, maybe 2,000 people that are part of this community and that have been here before or are building businesses or visiting regularly. And what's interesting about Vitalia is probably how it started, right? So it had a very unusual sort of kickstart, right? So we were inspired by the idea of a pop-up city. So last year, the Ethereum co-founder Vitalik Buterin did a so-called pop-up city in Montenegro, where he brought together people in crypto and Ethereum, but also in many different frontier technology areas, including longevity and biotech, synthetic biology, and things like that. And what it led to was creating sort of a small scale city level density of highly aligned people in the real world that started doing businesses and that started to experience something similar to having kind of your favorite tech bubble in San Francisco, but almost like an even better version of it. And this way sort of creates sort of rapid change in a new environment. We were very inspired by that idea and did our own pop-up city in Vitalia this year in January and February. And it was tremendously successful. It had more than 500 people come, some of the leading scientists in the field, like Aubrey de Grey, Jay Olshansky, or Brian Johnson has also been here, Balaji Srinivasan, Nava Ravikant, and it led to the creation of more than 20 businesses that are here on the ground and more than 85 startups that are within our ecosystem. We got more than 5 million, close to 10 million in investment into these companies. So it felt like this was really a moment of spark to manifest something very important in the real world.
That's fantastic, Niklas. And I just wanted to ask, in terms of your longevity goals, what are some of the key milestones at Vitalia City? And what do you hope to achieve in the next 5 years in terms of human longevity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we see ourselves as the foundation layer and enabling environment for scientists and entrepreneurs. So whatever the current science and technology allows to sort of push the boundaries to make us live longer and healthier, that's what we want to enable. And especially if it's the kind of things that are currently held back by existing constraints, or you have the ability here to do it much faster. So I personally don't have a bioscience background. So I always ask smart friends what's around, and I remain kind of relatively agnostic to what's the solution. I know there's some people out there who go into really sort of advanced new fields like cryonics or like full body replacement. Now we have chip implants with Neuralink. All of that is great. I always try to be a bit contrarian. I think there's a lot of sort of basic interventions and science and patents that exist or have existed for several decades that could really move the needle in a lot of meaningful ways, sort of many small and incremental steps that, in addition, could really improve life and health span in many different ways, sort of more sort of the bioengineering part and sort of bring those things that are already proven to market faster. So I think that's really a low-hanging fruit to quickly build up an industry and sort of actually meaningfully save and extend and make the lives of millions of patients healthier without necessarily relying on sort of a scientific breakthrough, like in cryonics, for example, how to unfreeze people, things like that. I'm very supportive of these things, but sort of my focus with Vitalia is I always try to encourage people to think what's already possible and what can already save people's lives now.
That's great. Thank you.
It's really good. So yeah, recently there's kind of been a bit of a surge about the debate between health span and lifespan, right? And that's what you're kind of getting at there, that there's ways to kind of optimize the way that people are kind of aging now to not have, not come down with the kind of chronic diseases of aging so soon. But then also there's this biotech element of being able to possibly reverse that. So what do you think are the most promising solutions now in the sense of actually extending human lifespan beyond the known limits? Like, do you think that that's actually something that is plausible, and how do we get there in as soon as possible? Because it seems that the ways to kind of stay healthy are kind of tried and true for the past, hundred thousands of years and haven't changed much, right?
Well, in some way, I think they have changed, right? So lifespan increased, I think, by about 2.5 times. And some of the key factors were, one big factor was the eradication of infectious diseases, right? Through things like vaccine and penicillin and things like that. So I think there is some very fundamental, like external things we can do to our health, right? So in the form of drugs and treatments and things we can kind of get into our bodies, right? Also, for example, genetic engineering or gene therapies, for example, right? So we are on the precipice of one of the most deepest scientific revolutions of our time, right? With this genomics revolution, right? The ability to now, so it used to cost millions to decode or sequence one human genome. Now that costs have dropped to something below 100. That's just so fundamental and enormous, right? And that coupled with the ability to do reliable ways of sort of engineering change in the human body by sort of speaking or modifying the language of life, that I think is something we really should jump on, right? So I have nothing against sort of health and wellness, and we know exercise and diet and sleep are important, and I'm very excited about changes like, for example, measuring your biomarkers much more accurately, right? So they're now that well currently measured, right? My background is in analytics. There's things we could do with cybernetics, for example, to get much more accurate measurements, and generally sort of improved healthcare models where you can get data before treatment and after, and it's measured reliably, or insurance models where you can sort of get access to these things, or access to like physiotherapists or like to personal coaches, a lot of that in much better ways, right? So right now that's like very over-regulated. Insurance plays way too much of a role. There's all these third-party payments. So there's a lot of things that can be changed or improved there. But I think it's still sort of the North Star or the goal or the idea to me is that life is good and death is bad, right? So we want more life, longer lifespan, and better life, more health span. There's no inherent contradiction. So let's keep pushing the boundaries as fast as we can, as much as we can. And I think that's very desirable, even if it leads us to being able to living hundreds of years long. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that we can reach it in our lifetimes, but I think the scientific and technological sort of evidence we have, sort of the frontiers that we can see through things like the Manaka factors and sort of understanding what causes aging and the process, and there is ways to sort of fundamentally intervene. I think that gives us very good reasons, or makes it credible to believe that there's like some very fundamental changes that we can make, right, to live substantially longer and healthier through sort of external interventions.
That's great. Thanks, Niklas. And there's a lot of noise at the moment about personalised health, particularly in the UK. And I just wondered, what was your view on sort of personalised health, and how is Vitalia going to support the sort of longevity community within that remit?
Yeah. I think the fundamental key to personalized health is data, and this data specifically about you, right? So I think the right now the system is we have like this generalized health advice from these very large studies, and while they prove some things and very important things, they don't necessarily prove it for you. All they do is kind of give you certain probabilities that this kind of intervention or this lifestyle change or whatever does something, but the ground truth is always your own body. Like our body and our biology is just so enormously complex that sort of the best way to really know what's working for you is to constantly, or to have sort of easy and cheap ways so you measure on yourself what works. I think there should be a much larger provision of services, that's assuming what you're working on, that allows you to get access to data that tells you what works for you. Right. I think that's kind of the key and fundamental change that we need and that we're working towards. And I think what we can do in Vitalia, what we can change is remove some of the obstacles around that, right? So I'm not sure what those are in your case, but the way data is like stored, how you get access to it, that's often a challenge, especially in an EU context. I guess with UK, you're not in the EU, not sure to what degree things like GDPR applies. And there's things like HIPAA in California or in much of the United States. So these laws and regulations often have the right intentions, but are often doing the opposite of what they're intended. Right. So I think, so I was very surprised, for example, by how cheap and accessible this kind of personalized health was in Mexico. right? In a place where you're like, okay, I expected sort of the most innovative things to be available in US and UK or whatever, but I got much better treatment than what I've ever gotten anywhere else or in Germany, like where it's just university sort of lauded positively as an example for healthcare provision. I absolutely don't see why. Right. In Mexico, really advanced healthcare was really, really affordable. So I went to this physiotherapist who went through this parkour with me of like these very precise measurement instruments, was very precisely telling me what areas of strength and flexibility were weaker when it comes to my back, and then sort of give me sort of this very specialized like plan on how to improve it, and then did like before and after measurement, and that like for the cost of like less than $30 per hour to work with a physician. I was like, what's happening? Right. So a lot of sort of the kind of mechanisms how to deliver the kind of things we can do at scale and at affordable rates, I think are substantially harder to do in many ways in places like the United States or the UK. So I really think we have to redesign some of these mechanisms from scratch. Have much more pay out of pocket healthcare, sort of decouple insurance from work is how it's done in the United States. So there's lots of, again, sort of human institution things that would allow us to unlock personalized medicine that I think we can be a good testing ground or launch pad in Vitalia for.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of getting at, I mean, how come, when you go to your GP, you don't get genomic testing or epigenetic testing or, all these biomarkers of longevity? I mean, the cost is arguably the same as it already is, to get whatever else they were going to do. So I feel like that's something that we can reform and advocate for. And there's no really logical reason why that can't be part of basic healthcare, healthy aging. So I understand as well. It also gets into like kind of the idea of N of one trials as well. Being able to track how different things were affecting you. If you started doing this specific thing, for this amount of time, and then being able to kind of track the effect, and that's what we're working on. And also, yeah, I wanted to ask about the AI and blockchain. So these are other technologies. When we talk about longevity, it's a bit of futurism, and also new technologies emerging. AI has gotten super big recently. Blockchain is still a bit underground, but it's establishing itself now as a legitimate technology. So how do these elements play roles in Vitalia, and why are they important?
Yeah. So I'm always a fan of looking at the problem, not the solution, and not like starting with the idea of, hey, how can we use AI or blockchain to like solve a problem? It's more like, what is the problem, right? And how can we solve that maybe without technology even, right? So maybe some of the best solutions don't necessarily require new technology to solve it. And many people in technology get too excited about the technology itself rather than the problem. So that said, there is very meaningful and important use cases for crypto and for AI. I think on the crypto side, crypto is really fundamental and important to us here in Vitalia, especially in overcoming some of the human institution problems, right? So the ultimate frontiers for crypto to me is not only finance, but also legal, right? So the way we design insurance and monitor insurance contracts, the way we fund these kinds of things, sort of mutual aid organizations for insurance, for example, and the way we fund science. Like this is something where crypto has made very positive contributions to the decentralized science movement. Right now, science is funded like from very top down, large organizations. So that means it's very bureaucratized, and sort of only more like established research gets funding, and sort of new, sort of more bold, adventurous kind of research programs don't get carried out. So I think blockchain and crypto have made or can make a lot of important sort of changes, especially when it comes to the human institution side. And then AI is just an enormously powerful tool to further or more deeply understand human biology and wrap it around our needs. So I think that's really the biggest AI upside, right? So it's a supercomputer that allows us to, and that's, I think, the two frontier areas where it allowed us to progress, right? So to understand human biology even better and wrap it more around our needs. And we see several startups that almost use AI kind of as a default. So anything that has to do with like serving human needs at this stage, you probably want to use AI for some parts of it. And then there's again tremendous advantages in the science side and AI helping us to understand biology.
That's great. Thanks, Niklas. So just a question about building the community for Vitalia. How are you going about that, and also the partnerships? Any key partnerships that you may have acquired?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So our community is coming from mostly from other entrepreneurs, right? So people who want to build a new business here, but also longevity enthusiasts or crypto enthusiasts, family members, and things like that. So we're designing a community that's physical here, that's permanent. But on top of that, for every person that's here, we have about 20 or 30 people that are elsewhere, but are still aligned with the same mission. And sort of have had that experience of having visited or working on something that's going towards the shared goal. Sort of visiting more for shorter periods of time, or start other Vitalia hubs elsewhere. So San Francisco and Lisbon, for example, are sort of the two places where most of us congregate and meet quite regularly. London, UK, obviously, as well, and Berlin. So it's a decentralized community that's happening all over the world with physical hubs. So Roatan is kind of the first hub. And, the online or decentralized part is probably nothing surprising. We do regular events online. We regularly go to like conferences and events and visit some of these communities. And then we regularly do events on site here underground. And there we act almost a bit like an accelerator. So we do regular programs to help startups succeed. We help them sort of to incorporate businesses, understand the regulatory environment here and help them comply with it. And sort of then have a lot of sort of in-person stuff. Many of us are living together in the same place. It's like this one tower we live in with my team and several of the other companies. So it's really fun actually to have sort of a community around you that's very aligned with your values, is very entrepreneurial, and thinks technology can make the world a better place. So I think that's very core and why people come to us, because they feel like they have a community that's it's much more deeply aligned with them than what they could find anywhere else in the world.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's really great that this is happening, and there's more and more of these pop-up cities occurring all over the world, which is great. Whether it's in biotech or even other areas. I think you and I both attended the Network State conference in Singapore, and I learned a whole lot about all of these different initiatives that are similar. But I also am aware that recently there's been kind of a threat to the Prospero and Honduras area specifically about allowing these free economic zones to kind of exist. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there and potentially why this may occur, and maybe even getting into the root causes of these kind of seemingly imbued perverse incentives that humanity just can't seem to shake off for some reason?
Yeah, I mean, in our industry, that almost comes a bit with the territory. We always call, or some people call it, this catch-22, right? So to do kind of the kind of things we want to do, like longevity or biotech, you might think of Switzerland and Dubai as a better place. But then these places are already growing very fast or are very saturated or are economically successful. So they're often not willing to be as innovative in any of these areas. And then when you go to like countries that are poorer, and that really need sort of external capital and development, and they're often willing to be more innovative, right? So take Rwanda, for example. There was this company called Zipline, which is the leader in drone technology. They're from San Francisco originally, but they weren't allowed to operate there commercially. So they went to Rwanda first. So Rwanda was a place that was generally very pro-innovation and was attracting some of these businesses. They were able to prove there that drone delivery of blood infusions would save mothers, like it would reduce mortality rates of mothers. So that's kind of remarkable that in many ways innovation could really move away from the developed world, because in many ways we're getting so risk averse. Right, in many areas that we're in, you don't see that in like AI or in software in general. But in areas like biotech or anything that is touching the physical world, the developed world has become really, really risk averse. And other places are increasingly seeing that and like, let's do something different. The challenge is, of course, that places like Honduras or other places in Africa or in Latin America, they often lack legal stability. Like legal stability is probably the main reason why these countries are poor, right? Which lead to corruption, which lead to like a weak rule of law, which leads to sort of either sort of private crime and just taking over other people's stuff, or in many cases, like the government being the main threat, right? Politicians are very, very corrupt here in Honduras, and sort of the using state power and using the power of the law really to enrich themselves and further their own interests. So how do you start, right? How do you create a better legal environment and legal stability, right? So I'm still very hopeful that this is possible. So places like Hong Kong or Singapore, or some degree Dubai have shown that, right? You're not like doomed to remain in poverty. There is mechanisms how we can sort of deliver better governance, better legal stability in these places. And I think the model of charter cities and of special economic zones has proven successful, right? So that's what made Dubai successful, and Hong Kong, and also China. China started in Shenzhen with special economic zones. So even though it seems hard and there's a lot of setbacks, and that I think is still the best way to go. The main hope we have when it comes to really reducing poverty and bring economic development and legal stability to poor places. So that's just enormously meaningful for me, right? So, and some of these setbacks, there's something that you can expect, right? We hoped within Prosper that it wouldn't happen so soon, that we'd be a big sort of bigger by then, but we're already generating like 1,000 jobs. Right. So just for background, Honduras adapted these special economic zone laws about 10 years ago, and the first zones were operational in about 2020, so about like 4 years ago. And the architects of these laws knew that governments would change, and sort of there would eventually be government that say, hey, that deal that that other government made with you, we don't like that. So we're just going to say that doesn't count and we take it away from you. So they built in very strong protections under like international treaties, international human rights law, and international sort of investor protection mechanisms, right? So this is currently what protects the zone. And that's what's being challenged with an administration that that came into power in 2022, right? So that administration headed by Xiomara Castro, it's like a very far left socialist administration that's aligned with Venezuela and Cuba and countries like that. So that is challenging for us, right? It's introducing leading to a lot of bad PR. And recently there was a ruling in Supreme Court which is threatening or has declared the zones unconstitutional, which is something, there are mechanisms and that is to some degree within their power. What is not within their power, what's blatantly unconstitutional, is to do that retroactively, right? So that's just a very grave violation, not only of international norms that count anywhere in the world, but also of the Honduran constitution itself. Like you can't make retroactive rulings, right? So we are kind of involved in legal and political arguments about that involve some of these treaties. Right. So we have very strong reasons to believe that we can be hopeful, right? Because this current administration is very unpopular, and it would not bode well for the interests of many people in this country if sort of the rule of law is further weakened or eroded in this way. And lots of people have came out to support, and there's still a chance to sort of preserve the rights under which we're under in the short term. And potentially we can also get those reinstated in the long term. So Honduras really is for me the place where it's meaningful to prove that something like this can work. Like I employ 12 Hondurans for whom it's like the alternative to go to the United States. These are like very talented Hondurans who work in tech. And the hope is we can make their country into a shining positive example for the world, instead of what Honduras is commonly associated with right now, which is crime and corruption. So that has a lot of meaning to me. And, if something has meaning like that, I'm comfortable and I want to take risks like that to make it possible. And that's, I think, how most of the great things that happened throughout human history that changed things for the better have started. It takes a bit of courage to do things in a place like that. but I fundamentally believe that it's possible. And sort of the many Hondurans that benefit from this or in my team continuously give me that hope.
Thanks, Niklas. So which brings me on to my next question, which is really, what is your long-term vision for Vitalia? And is this something you're looking to roll out across the globe? You just touched on it there. Is it a model that can be followed in other countries, do you think?
Yeah. So I'd say three things. The first one is we want to be the best place in the world, better than San Francisco or Boston, to build a world-class biotech company. Right. So if you're in the field, if you want to build a great company, that's like the first place you think about or where you can go. Second, we want to be multi-jurisdictional. We want to have physical hubs in at least 4 to 5 different places, because that allows like faster access to certain markets. For example, faster access to the African market or the European market, sort of by being closer to patients and things like that. And third, we want to develop a new standard, right? So there's a current standard how things are done, sort of the FDA standard. They've exported it all over the world. We don't necessarily want to say that's all wrong. Like a lot of the safety mechanisms and things like that are fine. We just more want to prove there is ways where you can innovate and ways in which you can make it more efficient, right? So we want to develop those standards. Hey, for example, you can unbundle safety and efficacy trials. That is, I think, a very key thing. And many scholars in the field agree that 1962, that introduced efficacy trials as a precondition for market approval, were a big mistake and were the main drivers of cost and lack of access to many people to healthcare. And to like new drugs and treatments that could save their lives. So we want to develop a new standard, right? So the way we do it here, sort of the process of like safety trials, of expedited access, of right to try laws, medical reciprocities. So these are all ideas that we could talk about that I believe I wouldn't have too hard of a time to convince you or most people, right? So for example, hey, it's approved here and we accept if it's approved in Germany. Like that's such a basic idea. Why is it not done like that in the United States? Like it affects real people. Like the movie Dallas Buyers Club with Matthew McConaughey is all about that, where people during the AIDS epidemic died a lot as a result from not having access to drugs and treatments that were approved in other countries. So that's not a very controversial idea. So we want to help the world see or to see ways in which it can be done better, so it can be also adopted in other countries as a standard.
Yeah, I think it's super important. This having right to try laws and having people have access to emerging clinical trials and things that may save their lives. I mean, I think there is this kind of paradoxical thinking where people go, oh well, it's super unsafe. We can't let them try these dangerous new things. But then on the other hand, is certain death. So it almost seems like it's kind of it's worth the try. So what kind of if you can talk a little bit about the specific therapies that are going on there that people are trying. I know, for instance, it was publicized that Brian Johnson had a polystatin gene therapy there. What else is kind of going on that people can actually access?
Yeah, so the main hub here is the GARM Clinic, Global Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. And they're a stem cell and regenerative medicine clinic, and they existed even before Prospera and have a medical license under the ordinary Honduran regime, right? So they relocated their clinic there because many of the treatments that were already proven safe and effective weren't able to get them into market in the United States as fast, right? So they went there into a place where it's easy for patients from the United States to access it. And they are now the ones who are providing also access to new treatments like mini-circles follistatin gene therapy, which is the one that Brian Johnson came for. We also have a new therapy approved here, a VGF gene therapy that is approved also in other countries around the world, but not the United States. But this way you can get faster access to it. So VGF is for treating hair loss, and it is for skin rejuvenation, versus follistatin is something that has many positive effects on your biomarkers, on your biological age, and also on like bone strength and muscle growth and things like that. So these are treatments that are available right now. There's another company called Symbiont Labs that can give you chip implants. Right? So for example, RFID chips, so you can like make payments, open a Tesla car, or like store private keys and things like that, which is not something that's actually completely new. That was actually done in the United States before. But what they can do here is that they can graduate faster to medical use cases. So for example, we hope that very soon we can have implants that can measure your biomarkers much more accurately. Something that I mentioned before, currently, like Oura rings and things like that, it's better to have them than not to have them, but they could be much more accurate. So these are the key things that you can do right now here in Vitalia.
It's good to know you're working on the hair loss situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. And just probably a final question for me. How accessible is this for the general population, this model?
It's really accessible, right? So if you're international, anyone can visit. Roatan has an international airport with direct flights from Houston, from Dallas, and from Miami. The Garm Clinic is just a regular clinic where anyone can go to. They're happy to receive more customers. The gene therapy by Minicircle costs $25,000, which seems to many people like a lot, but compare it to like a normal gene therapy in the United States, which costs about 1 million. Right? So, of course, 25K is harder to access for like a local population, right? So, within Honduras, sort of the medical treatments that are accessible are probably still a bit harder to access. We try to overcome that. In Vitalia itself, we're giving a lot of grants to local and to Honduran entrepreneurs. So this way you can get faster access, at least to the ecosystem. We also have like access passes in the future where you can access to these treatments for cheaper and for discounts. And also we're thinking of developing an emergency hospital in Roatan. Right, so emergency hospital is something that's really needed on the island. Anyone could benefit, and we can also develop an insurance model where sort of even where anyone could afford to get emergency services. We're also planning to work with like local philanthropies to make it accessible even for people with extremely low or no income. So I think that could be an enormous immediate benefit from within the country.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a really good initiative. I think a lot about kind of how we can improve this insurance thing, and even installing cryptocurrency into that as well. To be able to cover more longevity related services and other kind of things. And so I understand too that you have an event coming up early next year called Vitalia Forever, and it's kind of, I guess, a second installment of the pop-up city concept. So how is it different from the first one, and what are going to be the exciting things that are happening there?
Sure. I mean, first of all, the selling point for a pop-up city is just it's just an experience that will change your life. Right? You make friends for life there. You live together and you co-work together. Many companies have started during that time, and many lasting friendships, like even love relationships and things like that. So it's just something that is really repeat interaction with people. It's probably the only times you have that is during like work, but there's like a limited pool, or you had that like during university, which is where you made your best friendships. So having kind of the continuous interaction over a longer period of time, over several weeks, can be really enormously meaningful for your life. The island is also a tropical paradise, so there's loads of really, really fun things to do. It has like a perfect climate. It has the second largest barrier reef in the world for like scuba diving or snorkeling. So it's really just drop dead gorgeous. It has a really utopian vibe. So what's going to be different this time? So we have more territory this time. So last time we had one area and we bundled a lot there, like all the co-working and all the like longevity things, regular workouts, exercise, and healthy food. This time we're separating it a bit. So we have one location that's really for deep work, for co-work, where all the like startups and builders are. And then another hub is for longevity specifically. So everyone who wants to follow a protocol, eat healthy, go regularly to gym classes, or generally wants to be a bit more like social. And that will be the place for that, right? So either of those can be attractive to you. You can also, go very easily between the two of them in like 10, 15 minutes walking distance, or like through regular shuttles. So I really think the new pop-up city will drive more of the experience home for those who are considering moving there, right? So especially the new district with the Duna Tower, which is a 14-story tower with 82 units, and sort of the ability to co-work there and sort of get to know the community that lives there permanently. I think that can be very meaningful for anyone who wants to sort of actually is thinking about doing something different in their life or go to a new place, They can bring their family there to show how it works. So I think the new pop-up city will be sort of much more sort of attuned to a different range of experiences, right? So we're going to professionalize a bit more sort of access to treatments. We're going to have sort of more options for like longevity and for health and exercise regimen. We have sort of clearer options, and it's easier for you to incorporate a business. We also want to use crypto more, right? So we're currently working on our own sort of internal cryptocurrency inside. So you can trade within that currency and pay vendors. And the idea is that it will really solve a lot of headaches for the vendors, right? Because for the vendors right now, there's like, between crypto and local bank accounts and local currency, that's like very difficult. But with this model where we do like a city token, we can sort of absorb that complexity for the vendors and have like a clearinghouse at the end of each day for each vendor. So I think the next pop-up city will really be an even bigger and better version of the last one.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm planning on joining this time. I didn't make it last year, but this year I definitely want to check it out. It's cool to integrate all.
Fantastic. I highly recommend signing up soon because we're going to send the first wave of approvals in October 31. Right. So that means you get locked in the current pricing. They will later increase. And also you get preferential housing options and choices. So do it before October 31.
All right. We'll do it. Yes, so we're getting close to the end here. So I wanted to know if there was anything else that you kind of wanted to share to the world, to the Rejuve community, like any takeaway messages or key things that you really want people to remember or like take away from this.
Sure. I guess the key thing is that I've experienced in my career as an entrepreneur is don't wait for later to make changes in your life that you're thinking about. Right? Many people have the idea, maybe I need to earn or save more money first, or maybe I need to do a software startup before I do like a rocket startup or something like that. So I think jump right into it or right into it right now. If there's something you want to do different in your life, or you have this itch, you want to be doing something more ambitious, then do it right now. There's really no time to wait, and it will set you onto a trajectory faster. And that's, I think, what pop-up cities can also deliver to you. So you can really sort of test out different places and different kinds of communities and really get access much faster to many of these frontier areas in technology, right? So I would have had no idea how to meet people that work on actual like rocket ships or technology or work on synthetic biology. But these pop-up cities can give you much faster access to it. So don't wait. The time to sort of design or create the life you want is now.
Yeah, we haven't quite cracked unlimited lifespans yet, so seize the moment and jump into what you're passionate about now. I mean, that's pretty much how I arrived at this position, Rejuve, and getting involved with Singularity. That was just pretty much following something that I believed in and felt passionate about. There's no like magic formula. It's just like, hey, this is something I feel like is more important than my 9 to 5. I should get into this, and yeah, the rest is history. Thanks so much, Niklas, for joining us and sharing so much rich content about this. And everyone, just support pop-up cities. Check out Vitalia. Yeah, we will see you next time.
Thanks so much for having me, Jasmine and John. Really great pleasure.